I am very fond of the people from Voiceless. We have fun together. And we're all fond of animals in different ways. My own approach is animal behaviour and science, obviously. And other people are concerned about some of the cruelties that happen. And they're also rather bothered about ways in which animals are exploited in the wild around Australia. And I keep learning different things. When I was very little, I started reading Dr. Dolittle books. It's interesting that Richard Dawkins did the same thing. And the fascinating thing about those books is that they had animals talking to people and vice versa. I don't know what language it was in, but didn't matter. When I was 6 or 7, I just thought, yeah, that sounds cool. Very, very, very cool indeed. But since then, I've been convinced that I and my partner, who's a vet and filmmaker and reporter, really appreciate animals for what they are, not because of any fantasy. You know, Dr. Dolittle was a fantasy, but nonetheless, it showed something about communication. And there's been really some tremendous breakthroughs in science, really genuine. I hate using that word breakthrough, but it's been a genuine way of revealing the subtlety of animal minds, especially birds, but also animals like dogs, without whom perhaps we could not have evolved to be the creatures we are today. The implications of what we are learning about animals is that they can do 10 times, 20 times, 100 times as much as we ever imagined. They're sensitive to things, they're sensitive to emotion, to cruelty, to affection. These days, now that my domestic animals have gone, sadly, one was run over, 2 got old age, but now I feed the birds who come to visit. And if you watch birds, you don't actually have to go into the bush. You don't have to do a Jane Goodall. I would have when I was younger, but not just yet. But you look at these animals doing subtle things, and you can see their responses are far more interesting than you imagine. And what it really means is that nature is more complex than you ever believed. You just think, you know, you're surrounded by water in the river, water in the ocean, a bit of woods, a few creatures running around. But then you look at the ocean, you find there are maybe 100,000 viruses, bugs, in a drop of seawater. You go into the forest and you see not only animals, but maybe tens of thousands which depend on each other. There's a complexity of nature being revealed like we had never imagined before. And here we are with half the world being made up of cities, and us imagining we can just carry on like it doesn't matter. Well, it does. And that's what watching animal behaviour for me is all about. What can we do? Get to know the science. If you're a very young child, go to school and grow your lunch. See where it comes from. Then, maybe an older child, you're surrounded by shops selling meat, go to the abattoir as part of the school excursion. It's real. Deal with it. Get to know the complexities. That sounds like an off-putting thing, but get to know what the surrounding nature is like. I'll just give you one example, which comes from a comedian friend of mine called John Clark. You see him on television on the 7:30 report, pretending to be politicians. Well, sometimes he's gone out with kids in Western Port Bay in Victoria. And these kids have been told about the complexities of life and how swamps are important with trees in them, mangroves. And funnily enough, in Western Port Bay, they dug them all up to make shaving soap. I had no idea you could make shaving soap out of mangrove trees. Anyway, they did. And then they suddenly discovered that killed all the nurseries of the fish. And so what the kids have done is gone back and they've planted trees and restored the swamp, and the little shrimps have come back and the fish have come back, and they're restoring nature. The other thing that they found was that some nasty man actually dug up the saplings that the school kids had planted. So they crunched into the real world. So they learned about nature and they learned about people. And that's the sort of exercise that I think kids need. And they all got horribly muddy and wonderfully dirty, and they loved it. That, for me, is real science, and that's, I think, what we could do. In Australia, it's something like $20 billion worth of food being thrown away every year. In America, I know for households, it's about 48.3 billion American dollars last time I checked, and 120 billion American dollars if you count supermarkets and hotels with all those lunches, and planes, when they land, they chuck all the food away that's left over. Billions and billions and billions of bucks worth. And this is simply pointless. Do you want to waste all that money? It means it's futile. And so, get what you really need. I think an empty fridge is fantastic. You've got one meal sitting there in the middle with this empty fridge. You don't stock up as if you're going to have some sort of siege. So, there are lots of things you can do. People want to save money, and that's what it's all about. First, and then it's about nature second in their eyes. Then nature comes first after you've done it for a few years, and the money can go hang itself.